One room scattered with game pieces. Two worlds completely separated but so close together. This is the tale of Deltarune, a behind-the-scenes story that is just as mysterious as the hidden lore in Undertale. We're thrown in the midst of chaos only to return to where we started before we realize our adventure is coming to a close. But once this is done, we're left with many pieces that don't make sense, both figuratively and literally. In my last video, I pretty much covered Jevil A to Z from everything we were told in the game. If you haven't watched that video, I highly recommend doing so since it sort of sets the stage for this one. Because in this video, we're going to be breaking down the Dark World piece by piece to better understand what exactly is going on. And it's going to be a lot because there's quite a bit to work with. Sponsorships help out a ton, so I want to thank Skillshare for sponsoring this video. Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of classes focused on design, technology, social media, and more. Skillshare is also more affordable than most learning platforms out there. An annual subscription is less than $10 a month, which is astronomically less than what I paid for college. With Skillshare, you can learn the skills you want now, so you can create and do the things you've always wanted to do. Film videos, animate, study photography, etc. without having to pay what I overpaid to learn in college. Skillshare has an amazing offer going on right now too, for the first 500 people who sign up on the link below. You'll receive 2 free months of Skillshare Premium, which gives you unlimited access to over 25,000 classes. So check out the link in the description below to start learning the skills you always wish you had. And I want to thank Skillshare for supporting me as a creator. Okay, let's talk about Deltarune's Dark World now. Starting off, we know the Dark World exists, due to the secret egg we can pull out of it, alongside how Susie reacts immediately when she leaves it. But beyond these two examples, the first thing our character tries to tell Undyne is that the Dark World is real as well. Undyne asks us if we want to report anything, and Chris tries to warn her that a Dark World exists inside the school, only for her to laugh it off. This is totally something I forgot to mention in my last video, as the fact that Chris is trying to tell someone of authority, a police officer, that something weird is happening in the school. If this was a make-believe scenario, why would Chris, who is sort of shy from what I can tell, try to report the incident? It doesn't add up. But anyways, I digress. Let's swing back over to the entry point of the Dark World, the closet and the abandoned classroom. Now, we don't know what is actually in the supply closet besides papers on the floor and chalk, but we do see what appears to be our entire journey through the Dark World in the abandoned classroom. Our mind begins to piece it together as we see the isolated scattered things across the floor. The checkerboard, the stuffed doll, the cards. From left to right was our quest. To break it down further, we started off in the dark closet. This dusty closet mirrors well the first area we explore. After talking with Rousey, we leave through a giant door. And that's when we actually transition into the classroom. This is when we make it through the field of hopes and dreams, which is what this giant purple printed carpet represents. Card minions are scattered about, similar to how we run into them multiple times in fights. Sham is located up north, which lines up with his shop location. There's even a clock overlooking this entire area. Once we exit this area, we head into the checkerboard, which mirrors what we go to next in Deltarune. Of course, if we look very closely, we can see that God is waiting for us on the other side. The King of Legs himself, rivaling that of Metaton, dances furiously on the edge of the board. And from our sky view, we can see his red brilliance guarding the But from this point forward, we head into the forests and eventually approach Card Castle. The large pool of red pieces could very well represent the trees we encounter. And of course, all the cards again are the minions we face. Card Castle itself is the game cabinet, and the floors of the castle are mirrored by the shelves within. And with that, we have our general flow of how this room parallels to the Dark World. And honestly, I love it because when I was a child, my brother and I did the same thing in our basement. We created various subregions and played made-up RPGs with different toys. And we used a keyboard in our house set to auto to play the songs it had installed. That was the music to our game. But now that we have the actual map outlined, how do all the individual pieces influence things? There's a lot of cool things in the works, so let's go over them piece by piece. First and foremost, let's literally cover the pieces. Throughout Deltarune, we encounter all sorts of interesting components to actual games. Checker pieces, chess pieces, cards from a deck of cards, and so much more. In my previous videos, I talked about how I believe the Dark World itself is influenced by everything within this part of the school. It's almost as if a timeline is being created within these rooms. An alternate universe of sorts. Whatever is in these rooms becomes a part of that universe. Given that, we can assume anything that is brought into these rooms affects the world directly. This is why Susie and Chris have such an impact. But this is also why the hierarchy and overall order of the world exists too. The way the room is laid out literally defines the surface of the world. If someone moved the checkerboard, it might very well relocate that in this world's existence. But the purpose of the pieces comes into play too. When we're moving around the game board, C Round, which is the checker piece dog, actually powers up a ton simply because it was a normal game piece that reached the other side of the board. Obviously, in a game of checkers, this turns a normal game piece into a king, vastly improving its movement choices. While this is a game mechanic outside the Dark World, it becomes a reality within the Dark World by granting this piece heightened abilities and dashing, bone-crushing legs. Alongside this, we of course run into a lot of Pawn Man in this great board region. These are pretty much spot on for what pawns would be within the game of chess, and their difficulty reflects that. Prior to entering this great board, we have puzzle pieces as well, but by far the biggest influence over this world is directly related to playing cards. Throughout our journey, we encounter all sorts of cards. Rudins, Hathies, Rudin Rangers, etc. are all derived from your basic deck of cards. Even characters like Clover have a place in it, as they represent the club suit. It's actually really neat to see where all these characters are derived from. The original designer for a lot of these characters, as I pointed out in my Deltarune's Unseen War video, is an artist who goes by Canotines. What's interesting is a lot of these characters we know and love were actually fully illustrated prior to even Undertale being a thing. In 2012, Canotines had a design class in which they were making characters based off a deck of playing cards. We can see characters like Lancer, who is based off of spades obviously, in full glory sprawled out on a card. It's kind of neat to think that they were just now brought to life in character form publicly only a month or so ago. The king is there too. And from that point forward, other characters were created based off a similar concept. Beyond the cards mentioned, we of course have Rules Card, who is literally the Rules card. The other kings who are held captive, Jevil, who is one of the Joker cards, the Queen, who is mentioned by Jevil, and of course a mysterious knight, who seems to be the one running everything. We're currently missing the aces as well, and judging by the characters, it seems that all face cards in the deck have notable power. By the juxtaposition of Lancer's original drawing, it appears he falls into the role of a jack, which would sort of make sense given that he serves the king, his father. But just a moment before, I mentioned the knight being something that apparently governed over them all. Obviously, a lot of decks we're familiar with in the United States lack knight cards. However, in other countries, knight cards can be found seemingly in place of jacks, as they act as a face card. Seeing as the knight is a source of power in the Dark World, it does seem weird that a lower tier card has influence over a card like the king. However, there's a lot of different ways we can look at this. For starters, knights are a chess piece as well. They are capable of moving irregularly and are a good middle tier piece, but it wouldn't make sense for a chess piece to have influence in a world run by cards. However, knights can be found in a different deck as well, a deck of tarot cards. These are built out into additional suits, such as the Knight of Wands, Knight of Coins, Knight of Cups, and Knight of Swords, each one with a different meaning behind it. This is interesting as well because it plays into the whole Jevil angle too. In Jevil's subplot, we find that Sham, the shopkeeper, is closely intertwined with him. Sham tells us that he was the court magician, and that Jevil used to be the jester. This parallels perfectly with the Fool and Magician card roles in Tarocchini, which are 17th century tarot card game types. Within these game types, the Fool and Magician are known as counters, and can be used separately or together. According to Wikipedia's breakdown of the Fool's role, the Fool can't be captured while the Magician is vulnerable, which is pretty interesting given our story. Sham tells us that as a court mage, he was Jevil's only companion. Jevil was the only one to match him in the games they played, which makes sense since both cards have similar abilities. They're both wild cards essentially, while other cards could be capable of capturing the Fool. In the sense of the game's plot, it would make sense that only someone of equal ability would be able to seal him away for good, given that Card Castle takes place in the standalone game cabinet. It makes me wonder if Jevil was literally put back into the box. All the other cards are free to roam this room metaphorically, but the Fool is banished to this realm and only the players, people with the ability to move game pieces, can set him free. But that makes things interesting as well, because if Jevil is sealed away in this world simply because he was put back into a box, then that means what he told us could have been more literal than figurative. Telling us that the knight's hand is drifting forward, and that the queen is returning could literally be just that. Someone is going to reintroduce a queen card, or possibly chess piece, back into the game room. While the knight's hand is drifting forward, could be taken as the knight's plans are being set into motion. It could just be referring to how those in the subworld rationalize the actual game players. If someone came along from the real world, or at least what we think is the real world, and had the ability to influence anything in your world by rearranging, adding, or subtracting the boundaries and parts that make up your world you live in, you'd view them as a god. Them coming back and moving something would change everything about what you know. So given this, it makes a ton of sense that the knight isn't actually a figure in the Dark World. It's a character who has entered the abandoned classroom before, and by moving things or putting away pieces, they changed the structure of the Dark World. But who could be the knight then? Maybe one of the other students, perhaps your brother Azrael? I mean, he is returning soon. It's possible he could be deemed as the knight. But really anyone or anything could be the knight given that circumstance. Until we have more information about this Dark World and how it is all strung together, we can't really say for certain. Like I said in my last videos, I do believe something weird is going on in this schoolroom. What started as people playing board games evolved into a real world that was originally based in fiction. How the subworld was generated is still up in the air. But given the mysterious man behind the tree, I have a feeling, or at least a hope, it'll tie into Gaster. Regardless, it feels a lot like Toy Story, in how every object is actually sentient in some regards. I'm sure the metaphors and symbolism go far deeper than we might think. But then again, there's a chance we're just overthinking it all too. Regardless, let me know what your take is on the Dark World, its symbolism, and who you think the knight is in the comments below. And with that, thanks for tuning into this cross-game analysis. If you haven't checked out my previous video about Deltarune's true villain, I highly recommend doing so. Or if you're up for something really bizarre, check out my video about mirror worlds in video games. Anyways, thanks for watching guys and gals, and until my next video, cheers.